Hello, Rapid TV. My name is Jide Kene.
Hi, Rapid TV. My name is Steve Chooks.
Best Afrobeat song will go to The Bunch and Snoop Dogg. Oliver Twist.
Piece of my heart, Whiskey.
Right now, will probably be Grateful by Fino.
My favorite Afrobeat song is Afrobeat.
I can't. There's so much.
It has to be one of our Rasta songs.
I love a lot of them. I don't think I have a favorite Afrobeat song right now. I cannot pick.
I can't pop.
Living in Bondage.
It has to be between Blood Sisters and Lionhearts.
I don't have favorite anything. I have favorite food. I have favorite colors. I barely have favorite any other thing.
Oh my God. Living in Bondage. The first one. I'm not a child.
Right now, a ghetto love story.
Okay, my favorite Nigerian dish would be
Banga stew with rice.
Come on now. Okwa.
Pounded yam and egusi soup.
Beans and plantain.
is oha soup. Fufu and oha soup. Thank you.
Bread and akara.
Bitter leaf soup with catfish and snail and fufu. Proper Santana. Apple. Nekedu keke ime. Idi shone edemma. Idi kwoi. Ilalo fuma tata. Iteta iligo kwenni. Eman ndi gina afọ. You nwike me things. You understand? Okay.
Good morning. Welcome to Business Lens on Rapid TV. My name is Faith Daffy Joseph. And of course, you know the Business Lens is where we get to go through all the stories working the way of finance, the economy, whether globally or locally. And as usual, I have a number of headlines we're going to be looking at as we start the show, just quickly running through the headlines making the rounds. And then after that, we check what the stock market is saying. And from there, we now go on, of course, to have a special guest that will be joining us later on the show today to talk about what is going on with the presidential tax reforms. We know that the reforms have been signed into law. So what next after that? What, of course, are the implications as well for you and I as Nigerians? We get to unpack all of it right here on the show this morning. But we will start with headlines, and I have Daniel Effa, as usual, in the studio, global financial market analyst. Welcome to the show.
Good afternoon. Also, it's good morning.
It's still morning.
It's a raining morning, so...
Sorry, I know, it's raining.
Yeah, so it's good to be here again.
Okay, so Daniel, while I was away, because I was away last week, well...
We missed a lot.
There was a lot that happened. So let's start from the biggest stories. One of the biggest ones was GDP being rebased. Yeah. Okay. Now, of course, this is something that was a long time coming. It should have been done. We know the MBS talked about it last year. We thought it was going to happen much earlier. And then, of course, we had, it's pushed to now. But it has finally been done. Let's talk about what that means, really. Let's explain it, right?
Even though there was a GDP rebasing last week, it made us forget the fact that GDP report also came out for Q1 2025. So
that is true.
Everyone missed that, and actually our economy, based on the figures, shrinked from what the growth we had in the last quarter of 2024 into 2025. But that aside, GDP rebasing, like we talked about it last week, and the simple conversation is just GDP itself is just the total value of goods produced in your country, right? Of course, barring other different components, right? We start looking at GDP, real GDP, nominal GDP, just GDP in its basic sense, right? So what we basically did was we raised the price from what it was. So we changed the year of reference of pricing. So I used an example last week when I said that if someone was earning 50,000 in 2010, right? And the salary is now 200,000, but says, okay, I've earned 200% of my initial salary in 2010. The person is not being correct, because what was the worth of it was 50,000 in 2010, and what is the worth of 200,000 in 2025? You might even, by the time you look at the value, you might realize that even 50K 2010 is worth more than 200K now. So the idea of the rebasing is to bring a more accurate price reference sense.
What's the base year we're using now? 2019.
So we believe
you think that's accurate enough?
In the last 6 years or 5 years, which is 2024 was meant to be. So it was meant to be released for the Q1 of 2025. So It's even like 6 months late. So normally, so from 2019 up until now, price somehow reflects the difference in price has not been too.
Are you sure? Because let's talk about the fact that, let's talk about the currency, right? The devaluing of the currency. As at 2019, the value of the naira to the dollar was 360 naira.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you bring it back now, it's 1,500 to the dollar.
So the only conversation then would have been, because the ideal is just, it's actually a 5-year period, right? So the only thing that would have happened was saying, okay, we shouldn't rebase and wait till 2026, 2027 to turn our base year to. We can't use the pandemic year. Pandemic year was abnormally. So we'd have to still wait. Not even 2021, because 2021 is when price was recovering, so price was setting new levels. So either we would have, if we didn't do it now, we probably would have waited 2029
to do it again.
So 2019, for me personally, even for Nigerians, that okay, you were earning $1 million in 2019. No matter how progressive you've gone, you probably stay around doing 1.3, 1.4, 1.5 million in revenue. So that's why the GDP rebasing only reflected how expanded the naira, that dollar conversation. So if you notice, if you check the dollar difference from what it was before it was rebased and now, you realize that it's maybe $30-40 billion again, unlike the naira, which is over 100 trillion. So that is the difference.
Okay.
So that is basically the breakdown
of what that means.
Yeah.
Okay, so while we're rebasing that, the CBN also, of course, held its MPC meeting, a long-awaited MPC meeting, and everybody was watching to see what was going to happen, especially after the inflation reports came out, you know, the week before. And we saw that, you know, inflation dropped just a little, and the question was, will the CBN hold or will they tighten? And they decided to hold it at the 27.5%. But of course, there's still conversation ongoing about whether it is time for the CBN to start actually cut interest rates. In fact, I think there's a headline about manufacturers saying you have to cut it for us to actually be able to make some headway. But the CBN decided to hold. What is the you know, the justification behind that? So what do you think?
You know, I think at the beginning of the year we said there was going to be a likelihood of disinflation going into the year, as and in the sense that price will not be able to move upward at the same rate it was doing last year due to the whole policy changes here and there. So we've seen that already, and I think even the CBN cited it as part of the reasons why they are holding on to it. That we are not out of the waters when it comes to inflation. We are still having inflation, but it's decelerating. So we are in an era of disinflation. So we still if we still see what happened with full inflation, inflation still rose. So CBN is saying what is still holding us to continue an inflationary trend is just maybe energy. Stability we've seen in energy has kept us at this point of disinflation. So we cannot say we are out of the waters yet. It is completely working. They will now start cutting interest rates, right? So that is a justified move, right? And also, if you also look at what it's also doing for the CBN, CBN is raising bonds, raising treasury bills.
But what about the real sector?
At very high rates. Even the market is reflecting that. So I think we've complained about this. If we know my opinion about this fact that real sector is not enjoying it. But this is where I take a bit of I'm not too bothered again with what CBN is doing, because when the rebasing data came out, we saw a lot of sectors that have been what we call that are largely informal, right? So a lot of even up to real estate. I think the only sector that is not no percent informal is the oil and gas sector. So if you interest rate mechanism, transmission mechanism doesn't necessarily have a live effect on an informal economy. It just transmits any inflation or deflation to them. They don't have any, because they don't even play in the financial in the formal space, so they don't really bother. So what has helped those businesses that we're talking about, those industries, is we've had stability of exchange rate over the last couple of months, right? Petroleum prices have also remained relatively stable, right? Then now the market is reflecting. Your share value is increasing, so you can actually still play around equity, cash, borrow, and all because of that. So one way or the other, they are still surviving.
But let's
It
look
is
at
not
it.
the
Let's look at it
ideal
this way.
figures, but they are
Yes.
surviving.
Let's look at it this way, right? You're saying that it can raise, but how many of these industries are actually, in the markets
Yes.
that they can actually raise? I mean, it would be ideal if a lot of these other companies, these industries, or these manufacturers have their companies listed in the market, so that way they can actually decide to raise funds, but it is not the way right now.
Yeah,
so it is hard for them to raise funds.
And not to add the infrastructural issues we still have. For me, there's the CBN is taking as only one decision to make, right? So it is choosing between having access to more cash, right, to run its deficit, to run its operations, to also probably be able to set up infrastructure, than saying I'm reducing interest rates, I don't have access to cash, or businesses are thriving, right? Maybe that would be a big call for the government right now, because we are not really milking taxes yet. Our tax to revenue ratio is still very low, right? So maybe
That should change next year.
So maybe that is one of the issues. But remember that issue is also caused by the largely informal sectors that we have. If it is more formal, we would have less of that worry, because what you just need to see is just the account balances of all these people, and you know how much their tax they are owing you at least approximately. They can then plead their case. So those issues are still intertwined in the approach. However, should the CBN, what I'm expecting from the CBN to have done in recent times is to have given us a target. The only thing we've seen is from the federal government saying 15% budgetary target, which is, we know what is just get excited. But the CBN should be giving us that idea.
Do you think it's for us to get excited? Because if you look at what is going on with inflation right now, we're at 22.something%. That means that before the end of the year, we might actually hit the 15% target, which is the federal government's target for inflation for the year 2025.
The target was off of what? If we had rebased in 2024 December, and the federal government is now giving a target, it makes sense of that information. Right. So except they had the information of the rebase figure before it was released to the public. Because if you were at 30+% and you felt you were going to cut inflation by
but we rebase inflation as well. So
that's what I'm saying in January. That's what I'm saying. Except you add the figures before. If you had 24%.
But they did have the plan to rebase. So
yes. So I'm saying is that the approach of the government in terms of saying 15% was the target. Was it off the fact that they had already seen the figures from the rebased, or from the real life scenario of December 2024 inflation report, or let's say November, which of course the stuff was presented before then. Let's say November. So if not, you don't make that kind of assertion. Even the US did not bring down 10% inflation to 5% in a single year. It's not possible. So what
Nigeria will be the first.
What ways are you going to get? Okay, we've gone half of the year already.
Exactly.
We are not still. What we are still having is this inflation. Inflation is still, prices are still going up in some. Probably possibly started with that. Processed food inflation is still on the high. So if you get it to 15%, it means that these components they've gone to a negative growth on a month-to-month basis, which is impossible.
We will see. We will see what happens, at that time. But let's talk about this other headline about the diaspora. The federal government, the president, was very, very enthusiastic about this. The federal government is always happy when it comes to money. We're getting money. We're getting money.
We're also happy.
So the federal government was talking about how diaspora being one of Nigeria's most underutilized assets, saying that they remitted over $20 billion in 2024. That is huge, especially if you're talking about the coffers. But then I'm not sure if this breakdown reflects, every way that money could come in, whether you're looking at cryptocurrencies or you're looking at other forms of, this exchanges coming in. If it is just the one that comes in through the formal channels, that means that Nigeria is still losing out on the lots that can come in. But it is still commendable, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is. I think it is something that we should really, really be happy about, excited about. And I think that's also reflected in the way the market has reacted. We've seen a lot of foreign portfolios coming in, and most of them are definitely coming in from because as we have more population outside of the country, what happens is that these people will start earning economic power, and when they start earning economic power, we start seeing firms, foreign firms, trying to maybe create different specific mutual fund assets that that Nigerians can invest in back home. Those kind of ideas will come and they keep coming. In fact, we have fintechs who have products that can be invested, and these Nigerians still probably have accounts with this fintech fund. So you see a lot of these funds coming, and they'll keep coming. In fact, this year might even maybe double what we earned last year.
But this is also commendable for us because, I mean, according to the World Bank report, Africa as a whole got $56 billion. And we got over 20 billion. So that's a huge share, of that.
Almost 40% of that.
That was looking at the jackpot is working.
And what we should also be talking about now is the fact that this was what we were talking about earlier, which about structure, right? CBN should commend for that because CBN actually restructured and properly structured the FX sector. So you really don't have this extra incentive to have a black market in quote, right? Because prices are almost.
We just have retail and wholesale, basically.
Almost 3-4 naira difference. So you're not when you're looking at that on a larger scale, $1 million, $2 million. You realize that it's not. It is basically insignificant compared to what it was when we had over almost half. 50% increase you get in black. So that is what is now making us have we now have a better figure of what it usually was. So for me, I don't think it has even I don't think it has been lower than that in recent times. I just felt like we don't have the data because it wasn't fully captured.
It wasn't fully captured.
Some of them were actually being sold on the black market, and it was difficult to see.
All right, then. We have one more headline to go, and then after that, of course, we'll have to move on to what the stock market is saying and look at the capital share index. But this is interesting because when the Dangote refinery was kicking off, we all heard that was a 650,000, barrel per day capacity refinery. But now we're hearing that it can get up to 700,000 barrels per day. That is huge, and that should start by the end of this year. Okay, so moving from 650,000 barrels to 700,000 barrels, they're saying they're upgrading to get there. And I'm looking at it that, okay, wait, but we have not even finished the 650,000. So, but the Dangote refinery seems to be making so much progress and a huge shakeup in that particular industry.
I think what he has done is commendable for someone that is journeying in the oil sector probably up to 10 years, and he has been able to enter that kind of industry and is already making impact. Whether or not it has given him more grey hair is left to be desired, but at least he has done that. He has really done that, and it also points to the fact that there won't be a need for increase if he is not close to full capacity, right? So at the end of the day, that's what I thought I was talking about earlier. I think the Minister of Trade, I think she was also at this refinery talking about domestic investment and all. A lot of these countries have used entrepreneurs like this to build their economies. It is typical economic power playbook, right? Yes, if you now want to be thinking like China, where you start looking at no single leader should be as wealthy as that is another conversation entirely. That is a function of your ideology, which we don't have. We just want to grow our economy first. Let's get people employed. Let's get infrastructure in place. Just let the economy be vibrant. Let the earning capacity of Nigerians increase. Then
exactly.
We'll not talk about that in the future. What is our long-term ideology? Should we have billionaires in code take over our economy? Should they be all those capitalist conversations will come in later. But first, let us so all those conversations around monopolies. I just want, is it bigger? Is it more efficient? Is it delivering the value? Let's just keep doing it. And that is what he has done. Even though we've seen back and forth controversies here and there, but I will also say Nigerian government is still supporting to some extent, and we are trying to ensure that it gets there. But it should not expect 700,000 barrels of crude to come from Nigeria. It is not possible. It is not economically possible. It should understand.
Well, I mean, he's been buying crude from other places for a while, so I don't think it's going to stop.
US, get cheaper crude from the Middle East, Dubai, for example, UAE,
from everywhere.
Exactly. Just the idea is it shouldn't be a Nigerian business. For me, I think it should be an African business, and that is why it's important that Nigeria, from the Minister of Trade, Minister of Foreign Affairs, President, let's orc this business across African countries. This is what Donald Trump would do.
Exactly. So, well, thank you very much, Daniel. Going through the headlines very, very quickly. We will be looking at what the Nigerian stock market is saying, or what he said last week, basically, right after this break. Of course, you are still watching Rapid TV, and this is Business Lens.
name is Kunle Remy.
Hello, Rapid TV. My name is William Suchemba.
My name is Choma Chukuka.
Hello, Rapid TV. My name is Stan Nze.
Hello, Rapid TV. My name is Vivian Glam Gabriel.
Hello, Rapid TV. My name is Jide Kene.
Nigeria's economy, the global market, what does it all mean for you? From stock market insights to global financial news you need to know, from Wall Street to the main street and of course the marketplace. Get the answers you need every week on Business Lens with me, Faith Dafford Joseph, as I bring into focus the stories, strategies and shifts shaping our economy. No angle is missed as I talk about the business, the people, patterns and possibilities behind them. Welcome to the Business Lens.
Rapid TV, rooted in truth, driven by impact.
All right, you are still watching the Business Lens on Rapid TV. My name is Faith Dafford Joseph, and I did mention earlier that I have a special guest coming on, and we're talking about something very, very important. From about 2023, we had this conversation about tax reforms, and it went on, and we, of course, had the laws or the bills passed on to the National Assembly, waiting, of course, for them to be passed. There was a lot of back and forth as well on that. Everybody trying to reach some sort of consensus, and it finally happened, right? This tax reform bills were finally signed into law by the president. That was last month in June, and he signed 4 finance bills into law, and this is supposed to set major reforms, of course, for taxes in Nigeria. And this is major, like I said, because we should have done this a very, very long time ago. Everybody has opinionated that these reforms were very necessary. We were supposed to have done this, and now it has finally happened. But what exactly are the implications? What exactly will they do for Nigerians? What do they mean for us? And that's what we'll be discussing today. I have a very special guest. Of course, I mean, in the conversation where the tax bills is concerned, he's been the one championing it, and he's the chairman of the presidential tax reform, bills. And he's also going to the committee on tax reforms, and he's also going to be the one championing, of course, the implementation come next year, because they're supposed to kick off next year. I have joining me now, Mr. Taiwo Oyedele is the chairman of the presidential committee on fiscal tax reforms. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you, Faith. It's a pleasure to be on your program.
All right, so thank you so much, sir. You have done amazing work so far in over a year trying to push this forward, and it has finally happened. And of course, you have been everywhere, whether it's on X or on different, channels, talking about the implications and, of course, the positive things we can expect from these bills. So let's talk about, sir, the implications for Nigerians, specifically. What would you say Nigerians can expect? What are the implications for these tax bills in general before we dive into other parts?
Yes, thank you once again. Yeah, I think a good starting point is to look at what were the key challenges with our tax system and more broadly the fiscal system before the introduction of the Presidential Fiscal Policy and Tax Reform Committee, to look at these issues extensively. And those issues would include the multiplicity of taxes, where you have to pay all manners of taxes and levies everywhere you turn, whether you're a small business, medium size, or large, nobody was spared. We also had the multiplicity of collecting agencies. Not only are you paying so many taxes, you're having to deal with multiple agencies across the board, which in itself is a lot of administrative burden for both the government and, more importantly, the taxpayers and businesses. We also have issues to do with, lack of progressivity in the system, where low-income earners were being taxed heavily. And more often than not, you find the high net worth individuals are not paying their fair share of tax. We have a lot of small businesses that are being overburdened with a lot of taxes. We also don't have sufficient harmonization among federal, state, and maybe even local government revenue collection, apparatus. We had all these issues, there was no advocacy to protect the vulnerable taxpayers, especially small businesses. Businesses were largely disadvantaged in the sense that if you wanted to invest in a factory in Nigeria, you had to bear the cost of VAT for your investment. You couldn't claim the input credit back. So essentially, these reforms were designed to be people-oriented, to be growth-focused and efficiency-driven. So those are the benefits that the Nigerian people should expect, individuals, households, investors, large businesses, and small businesses as well.
All right, thank you very much, for that. But let's talk about, some specifics where this tax reform bill is concerned, and that's looking at for small income households, right, and also for individuals earning a certain amount. Because I know that you were trying to break it down at some point, talking about if you're earning maybe 800,000 naira annually or less than $1 million, that you get some sort of relief from this, and also for households. Can you break that down for us a bit?
Yes, so I think it's one of the areas that people don't quite understand. It's often misinterpreted. So the 800,000 naira that is taxed at 0% is what we call taxable income. So if you earn a gross income of, let's say, 1 million a year, you have what we call statutory deductions. You make pension contribution, you have some deduction for National Housing Fund, and a few other things. When you take these statutory contributions out of your gross income, and then you take any other relief, like in the case of our new law, we have rent relief of up to 500,000 naira. When you take all of that out, whatever is left is what we call taxable income. Then a further 800,000 in that amount is taxed at 0%. So depending on the kind of deductions you have in the companies where you work, you may find that someone who is earning around 100 to 120,000 naira a month will no longer have to pay any PAYE. They just collect their money and their net take-home pay will be enhanced to enable them meet their, basic needs. That's on one hand in terms of the income tax. If you are middle class, based on our analysis, it is in the region of 1.8 to 2 million naira a month and below. So that you will see a reduction in your personal income tax, PAYE, on a monthly basis. If you're above that threshold, you see some slight increases. It can be as little as 1,000 naira a month. So if you earn like 100 million naira a year, you may see a more pronounced increase, or up to the margin of about 25%, income tax rate for the high net worth individuals. In addition to these, we also have the consumption side, but this is the income side. On the consumption side, what are the basic things that people consume? Food will be number one, education, healthcare, accommodation, and transportation. What we've done is to also remove the VAT on these items. So the ordinary Nigerian, once these laws are implemented from January next year, will see the relief from two angles. One, their income will be enhanced. Number two, the prices of goods and services that they consume as essentials would come down.
Fantastic, which of course was going to be my next question. That's talking about the zero rating on essential, products. But I think you already explained that now. But let's talk about for companies, that are going to be spared CIT. You say companies that earn less than 15 million, per month. So how does that work exactly? And does that also affect the people working in that company? That's talking about the staff. Because if the company is spared CIT because of their earning, if they pay somebody above that threshold that you talked about, maybe above the 1 million or 2 million, thresholds, does it affect them in any way, or the company just gets that rebate and that's it?
Yeah, so it's the treatment of a company is different from the treatment of an individual. So if you have a company and your annual turnover, this is just your sales, your annual turnover is not more than 50 million naira, your corporate income tax rate will be 0%. So which means you don't need to pay corporate income tax rate. But bear in mind that when a company earns income of 50 million in a year, it does not mean that the owner of that business has made 50 million naira for themselves.
Of course.
It is out of that 50 million, they'll cover the cost of whatever they were selling or services they're providing. They'll cover the cost of salaries. They'll cover utility like electricity and diesel. They'll cover transport. They'll cover all the expenses out of that. So on the average, you expect that if you're lucky, you have profit to keep for yourself, which is around 10%. So which means a small business that makes about 50 million naira sales in a year will be lucky to have profit of about 5 million. If you divide that by 12, you're not even making up to 500,000 naira a month, despite taking a lot of risk and employing other people. So we thought it's important to encourage entrepreneurship in Nigeria. So that is why, on the average, their net amount exempted from tax is slightly higher than if you're working as an employee. Now, for the employees of those businesses, you would agree with me that businesses of that scale are unlikely to be paying their workers, 200,000 naira a month. So they tend to pay, sometimes a lot less than 100,000. So those businesses will no longer have to worry about PAYE on the amount they pay to their employee. But should it be that a small business like that is paying about 150,000, 200,000 per month, they would also have to comply with deducting PAYE tax on those employees of theirs. So the distinction about what taxes you pay as an employee is not whether you work for a small or large business. It's based on the level of your income, whereas your exemption as a business is based on the level of threshold of your annual revenue that you generate.
Interesting. Thank you for breaking that down. Totally understand that now. But one of the things that you kept harping on when you were having your town halls or when you were having your Twitter's, explanations that's on X, you kept talking about how, people don't have to pay different levies, whether you're looking at the state level or the local government level. So let's talk about how this is going to be synchronized. How exactly will it be seamless, collecting these taxes and preventing all of these other levies that different state and local governments, impose on the people?
Yeah, I wish I can say to you that it will be seamless, but to be realistic and be honest with ourselves, it will not be seamless because the issues are complex. A lot of these issues are, right from our constitution. You have the taxes that local governments are empowered to collect, including things like produce tax, wheelbarrow tax, bicycle tax, radio levy, TV levies. We cannot write a law to say they can no longer collect. That law will be unconstitutional. So you also have some of those taxes at the state level. So what we have done is we have harmonized the taxes and levies that we're able to harmonize without breaching or going against the constitution. And the ones we are unable to, we have already sent proposals to the National Assembly to amend the Constitution so that we can have this harmony all the way from our Constitution. In the meantime, what we're doing is appealing and engaging with, sub-national, at the state level, at the local government level to say, if you decide not to collect wheelbarrow tax, nobody will take you to court. So the fact that you have the power to collect the tax does not mean you must collect it, especially when it's no longer making sense, because these are like our most vulnerable citizens. We should not overburden them with taxes. So we are confident that this will gain some traction and we get some buy-in. I think it was even in June when the Governors Forum already agreed that they will discontinue some of these taxes. So fingers crossed, but we also need the help of all Nigerians to make this their project, so that we can all work together to relieve Nigerians of this burden of double taxation as quickly as possible. Yesterday was the best time, today is the next best time.
Fantastic. But still, let's stay on the issue of, the synchronizing or the harmonizing of this across, federal, state, and local government levels. I have seen some reports, some lawyers talk about how this is a sort of centralizing, tax collection, and how they think that it will promote some sort of unitarism. Can you speak to that? How exactly does this help us? Especially we're talking about, our federalism, fiscal federalism. Does this in any way, conflict with that?
Yeah, so we totally disagree with those narratives by some lawyers, sometimes not even lawyers. Some analysts believe that things are over-centralized. They talk about fiscal federalism. So what is important for us to note is that the ownership of revenue is what is important, not who is collecting the revenue. So if I'm a landlord and I have an agent who collects my revenue for me from rent, why should it matter whether it was paid to me directly or was paid through my agent? We look at so many countries around the world, and you see countries like South Africa, you see countries like Rwanda. In fact, in France, not only do they collect revenue centrally, they also process payments centrally and prepare financial statements for each level of government centrally. It's still your revenue. We're just saying when we collect it centrally, there is more efficiency, less chaos, and there's more transparency. That is what you see with something like VAT, where it's mostly the tax of the subnational, but it's collected centrally. Something like stamp duties is entirely the tax of the state, but it's partly collected by the federal government and passed on to the state. You find something like personal income tax is the tax of the state, but it's legislated by the National Assembly. You find something like land. Land in Nigeria belongs almost entirely to the state. If you go to the US, states don't even own up to 20% of land, right? So when you look at all the analysis, you will conclude that Nigeria is one of the few countries in the world where there's so much resources assigned to the subnational. So we should not be debating about whether there is central, centralization. We should just focus on optimization, efficiency, and utilization of the revenue for the purpose of the people. So I can assure you that what we are doing in terms of harmonization is actually going to be to the benefit of the subnational, not the other way around.
Interesting. You talked about the efficiency. One of the things that we also have for the tax reform bills was the tax ombudsman. Can you break that down for us, their role and how people can use that?
Yes, we have many taxpayers who are unable to defend themselves, either because of lack of knowledge or because they do not have the resources to hire lawyers, accountants, and tax consultants to defend them. So what tends to happen is those kind of taxpayers are left out in the code, and they're taken advantage of more often than not by some officers. Some of them are even non-state actors. Now, what we have done is to now create a structure supported by law to be the advocate and the defender of the taxpayer. So all that you need to do is when somebody comes to you to harass you about paying taxes, or they want to lock up your shop, or they want to take your wares because they believe you should have paid. We've seen instances of physical attack in the process of wanting to collect tax. We should not be doing that in 2025. We're better than that as a people. So what the tax ombuds will do is to be the advocate that stands in between to ensure that there's fairness and protect the taxpayer. But that doesn't mean you should go and do the wrong thing and run to the tax ombud. So if you do the wrong thing, the tax ombud will not be able to protect you, only when you do the right thing. So that's the whole concept. And this tax ombud will also be the advocate for simplicity, for improvement in the system. As people are complaining about what is not working, the ombud will collect the data and use that data for, to advise government on what area they need to improve on, what policies are working, the ones that are not working, and what else is going on around the world. So we no longer be behind time in terms of the modernization of our system.
Fantastic. Because of time, we have to wrap it up. But I have one last question to ask you. And it is because I've also followed the journey of, this entire tax reform, joined the spaces, read your thoughts on X and, different town halls that you've held. You were able to gain the trust of a lot of Nigerians throughout this process. They're talking about forming of the laws, the passing of the laws, because you have been hands-on, going from one place to the other. But do you think that you can maintain this trust? Right? Nigerians have been bettering a lot by government agencies and governments when it comes to trust. There's a lot of trust deficit. But you have attained a feat. They trust you, where this is concerned. So do you think you can maintain that trust all through the implementation, of these bills come next year?
Yeah, we are very grateful to the Nigerian people for the level of trust in the work that we do. We do not take it for granted. We recognize that trust is earned, and it's earned on a daily basis. You have to be consistent with what you do. You have to be honest with the people. You have to do your best, especially for things that are within your control. So one assurance that I can give, and this is also based on the 100% commitment and support from Mr. President himself, is that we'll do everything within our control to ensure that we deliver on the promises of these reforms and that Nigerians will see the benefits as quickly as possible. But we cannot give any guarantees that everything will work out perfectly, because not all of these levers are within our control to be able to pull off, as you would understand. But as much as possible, we will give it our best shots, and we are optimistic that the outcome will be much better than we have seen any time in our history as a country.
Thank you so much, Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, for joining me on the program today and helping us break this down. Hopefully next time we can have you in, maybe next year, when the implementation phase begins. I hope that you would be available once more to talk to us through it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
All right, and that's our show for today on the Business Lens. My guest, of course, Daniel Effa, for the headlines, looking at different headlines across, financial news. And then, of course, Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, the chairman of the Presidential Tax Committee on Tax Reforms. All right, so we will do this again on Thursday. Coming up, of course, on Rapid TV. After this, we have the news at noon. My name is Faith Joseph. Enjoy the rest of your day.
This is Rapid Broadcasting Network, RBN. We connect people, power stories, and amplify voices.
And you're tuned into Rapid TV.
I love Rapid TV.
Rapid TV. Thank you, Rapid TV. Please keep watching Rapid TV.
This is Rapid TV.
Rapid TV.
Keep watching.
Keep it left down.
Leave it like that.
Nigeria's economy, the global markets, what does it all mean for you? From stock market insights to global financial news you need to know. From Wall Street to the main street and, of course, the marketplace. Get the answers you need every week on Business Lens with me, Faith Joseph, as I bring into focus the stories, strategies, and shifts shaping our economy. No angle is missed as I talk about the business, the people, patterns, and possibilities behind them. Welcome to the Business Lens.
Rapid TV, rooted in truth, driven by impact. This is Rapid Broadcasting Network, RBN.